Welcome to Overtime on Inferno, your weekly roundup of all the biggest stories in CSGO. Quicker than Elon Musk can ban Elliot on Twitter. Sad day for us all. You can rate and review us in the episode. That would really help us. My name is Logan. This is the artist formerly known as Aizyesque. Let's get into it.
Yeah, it's been a tough week, as you can see. I've been thrown in Twitter jail. Me and Edward Snowden. I was just having a chat with him earlier. We've been extradited. That's not the right word.
I think that's the right word.
It is okay. Well, we've been sent down under.
No, that would be Australia. That's a different thing, man.
Yeah, well, that is what we did with convicts back in the day. That's what Australia is. It's just our convicts. So, that's I'm for the foreseeable future until Elon gives up on the dream of controlling Twitter. I'm in Twitter jail, which is what this is.
Yeah, so as you can see, Elliot is, if you're watching on video, you can see that Elliot's in a different location than normal. That's because he's in Sweden.
Yes.
He didn't tell me he was in Sweden. He told me he was at an airport, and I had to figure out where, based on the airport, he was. But either way, it's scuffed for this week.
I wasn't sure if I was actually traveling because it took. I've had a whole thing with trying to travel. It was booked very late. The person who booked it forgot to give my surname to the airport. So that was fun, trying to explain why my middle name was now my surname on the ticket. It was booked like the first flight was booked at Atlanta. Thankfully, I realized at 10 p.m. last night, hang on, shouldn't take 7 hours to get to Sweden. But I'm here now. I'm working a StarCraft event, which is going to be interesting because what I know about StarCraft is very similar to what I know about how good ninjas in pajamas are. Absolutely nothing.
All right, let's get into the actual major. You were joined last week by one of our favorite HLTVers, Harry. I think he's technically an HLTVer. Harry, who you and him talked about the Legend stage and how I had previously died of NA continuing to do their stupid shit of losing. So we are now on to the playoffs, which is, I think, the important bit of this major. Let's talk about a little bit about.
Was it the most important bit of the major? That is an important question.
The semifinals, realistically, was the important bit. Let's be real here. I think let's start on.
I think the quarterfinals were the most important part of the major.
I think any match that Furia was in was the most important part of the major.
Well, even then, like their game versus Na'Vi was clearly the most important game. Like Mouse versus Cloud9 was probably the second most important game in a way. Like those, like Cloud9 and Na'Vi were the big favorites when it came to playoffs, and they got smacked.
Yeah, and let's start on that side of the bracket. So Mouse, Cloud9 coming in after going 3-0 in the new Legend stage. Right after really, really slow starting the play-ins, going 0-2 to start play-ins, then winning every best of 3, winning everything in the group stage, coming to quarters looking like the best team in the event, and then they got slapped by a bunch of young kids and Dexter.
Yeah, they choked pretty hard. I think you watch Mouse play in the semifinals, and they don't look like a team who should be beating Cloud9. But you watch them in the quarterfinals, and they looked clearly better than Cloud9. I think it was a case of Cloud9 not living up to pre-game expectations. I really do think it was a case of Cloud9 choking on stage, which we all knew was a possibility, and unfortunately does add credence to Harry's idea that Cloud9 are just Astralis, but like 4 years ago, which is really annoying because I don't like it when he's right or even approaching right.
Yeah.
But it does add some credence to that theory. I mean, they are clearly good enough, and they will be kicking themselves. They might not get a better chance than this to win a major, and they're throwing it away.
Yeah, the
They,
second that
they
FaZe was out 3-0, the second Navi went down to Furia, Liquid wasn't in playoffs, right? It felt like it was kind of anyone's game, right? To me, it didn't feel like maybe Fnatic could win, but it felt like literally anyone else in playoffs that I could make a legitimate argument for them winning the whole thing.
Cloud9 had to beat Mouse, Outsiders, and Heroic to win the match, and they fell as think no. I don't think there'll ever be a point again where they will play Mouse, Outsiders, and Heroic, and that's all they would need to do to win the major. That's all they needed to do, and they just choked at the first hurdle. I think this event being in front of a crowd for the whole thing, and it being the crowd that it was, I think really helped the team. It made it a completely different atmosphere, like a completely different tournament in a way. And it became who could deal best with it. And a team like Outsiders, who are so disciplined, so calm under pressure, like they don't feel pressure because every round for them it goes down to the last 5 seconds. Like they relish in the pressure, and I think they really it really helped them that every game is in front of a stage because other teams choked. Other teams are like, oh shit, we can actually win a major here. Like this is kind of big. This is important. Whereas Outsiders, it's like nothing phases them.
Yeah. We'll talk a little bit more about Outsiders in a bit. I want to talk about Mouse for a minute because while this was Cloud9's easiest way to win a major that we've seen since 2018, and that wasn't particularly easy, this for Maoas was kind of it felt to me like it was a confirmation of everything that we had been somewhat thinking about for the last year and a half, other than the fact that Dexter is a bad player and should not be on this team. And I'm not saying that that's confirmed in either direction. I'm saying jury's still out on that, but I think that everything that we had been saying about the Mao's Academy project, about Torji, about JDC, about how Frozen plays, right? I think that that was further compounded and was proven in a legitimate way in which you could see it, right? That they made semifinals in a major, they lost to only to the eventual major winners. I think that that is proving one of two things, right? It's proving that Mao's was right and that maybe we should have trusted them a little bit more, which is terrifying to think of. But number two, which is perhaps the more important one, which is the academy system works. This was the first big test of the academy system that we've had, right? We've had like what 4 seasons of WePlay or some shit like that, but we haven't had a real like test of it. And this team that Mouse has is a team of 3 players from their academy system, as well as Suhi, who's on Gamer Legion, also from their academy system. Everyone on this Mouse team did well.
So I have a couple points to make. One is Torzi isn't as good as we thought he was. Unfortunately, he's not the first AWPer to struggle under the leadership of Dexter. I will say that
He won't be the last.
Torzi, well, he might not be, but Torzi doesn't look that good. I really wanted him to be good. Doesn't look that insane. Number two is I don't think this proves Mouse right at all. I think it does the exact opposite. It makes them look stupid for not for like pissing about with NBK and to some extent Bemus as well. Although that one's a bit more understandable. Like these kids had been like Exertion had been ready for the first team for 6 months, and he was just like waiting for his opportunity on like the next version of the NXT team. Like he was still on the NXT. Like you watch him, he was clearly ready to be at tier 1 a long time ago, and they didn't move him up. They moved JDC up. They moved like whoever. Like fine, like he replaced BMAS roles wise, and that's ended up working. But I remember 6-9 months ago us saying, do a full Gambit youngsters, keep Frozen, and put in 4 of the kids. That included Suhi, who I think still looks pretty good. And I think if it's taken this long for this team to be good, it would have taken about the same length of time for a full team of kids to be good. I don't think. I think they wasted time. I think if they'd have moved Exertion up, even if they'd have brought in Suhi for Dexter, which fine. Now you can argue maybe Dexter is the right person. I don't know. But if they'd made that move earlier, like maybe they would have been even more ready at this major. Maybe they'd have actually won it. Like maybe they'd have been the best team in the world. Maybe, or at least the best team at this major. Instead, we're still looking at like another 3 to 6 months before this team really challenges for championships. Which, yeah, it's fine, but like you could have just done it sooner. Like, I don't understand. But everyone seemingly outside of Mouse knew how good this NXT team was, knew that this team was going to be superstars. And they pissed around with MBK for some reason. It's frustrating.
I can't even pretend to defend the NBK shit because I don't. I'm pretty sure that was a widely agreed upon thing that was dumb, stupid. Insert any given expletive here, based on that. But I still I watch a lot of basketball, right? And there's this thought process with the Philadelphia 76ers, which is trust the process, right? And that
Yeah.
you're I don't know if it's worked here. I don't think it worked in Philadelphia, but I think that there's a point in which trust the process does kind of become true, and you just gotta. There's a point in which you and I are at best armchair analysts, um, and that
Well,
there's a point in which we don't know what's going on within the teams, right? And that it's always possible that we don't know something, right? But the MBK move was a terrible decision.
Of course, but people didn't. There were people, when I said at the time that the MBK move didn't make sense, and people are no, you need to have him in here to guide the youngsters. Like when JDC replaced him, like I went back and looked through the TLDR Discord at the time because I was very vocal about the idea that JDC was a much better idea than NBK at the time. And everyone else in that Discord seemed to disagree with me. I mean, there were people saying, like, no, MBK is definitely better right now. Like, just because JDC is young doesn't mean he's going to get better. Like, how long do you need to wait for JDC? They wouldn't be, I don't think they'd be making top 8 if they had MBK. Like, JDC was really good in the group stage. And I think that's a really key thing. Like, that was a really key reason their T sides were good, were how good JDC and Exertion were as a pair on the T side.
Yeah, I think Mouse's. I continue to think that this proved the academy system, because the players from academy looked good, regardless of current thoughts on Torji, on how good he is right now, how good he may be in 6 months. I think the rest of the players, especially Exertion and JDC, were definitely proven in how well in which they did. I may concede a little bit on the Mouse was right.
I think, yeah, that basically sums up what it is with Mouse Swords. It's like they are very, very close to being good, and they just need a little bit more time, or maybe it's one more move that makes the difference. Maybe that's minus Torzi. I don't know, but it's frustrating because this could have been found out 3 months beforehand if we weren't, like, if we just called up Exertion then and there. Everyone knew. There's a tweet from like when Mouse signed NBK. There's a tweet from Scrawny where he says, "The Exertion's time will come. You are just putting it off. This move for NBK is cowardly and timid." And I thought at the time it was a brilliant tweet, and I think it's aged extremely well. Like, Exertion was so obviously ready for this level, like. But yeah, it is a triumph of the academy system. Of course it is. But it's hopefully it shows other teams not to do what Mouse did and actually just trust that your academy players are good enough. I don't think the difference between the academy and tier 1 in Counter-Strike is anywhere near what it is in traditional sports.
Mm-hmm.
In traditional sports, you rarely see players go from academy straight to the main team and look decent. Whereas here, you see like I think the skill level is just the skill gap is not as big, and you can if you're really good in academy, you're probably going to be pretty good in tier 1. I mean, Sin is a good example of that from Big. Chiron less so, but Patsy was in the academy system. He just came into the fight. He wasn't even that good in academy. He looks better at tier 1 than he did in academy.
Yeah. All right, I want to move on to one of the next teams here. Let's talk about Fnatic for a second. As I said before, I think Fnatic was the only team that I realistically could have said you're probably not going to win the major here. Out of the 8 teams in playoffs, I think that them getting through group stage on its own is kind of their own win. I don't think this team was built to win right now. I think them getting to playoffs on their own is a great time. Especially 3-1, right? They had to beat actually like OTA teams. I won't say great teams because Big was one of them, but okay teams. And especially because we found out after the fact now, what is this, a couple days later, that Crims actually has had a pinched nerve the entire time in his hand. So with all of that happening,
I do have a bit of a problem with the idea this team wasn't built to win now, because you have Crims and Roy.
Oh, okay. Like, they were built to win now, but they weren't built to win. It wasn't like a built to win this given moment 2 months after we were created. I still continue on the you probably won't win a major event within like 4 months of your existence as a team. Especially, it's brand new core. It's Mezzy and Crims are the only 2 people from the original roster left.
It is, but then why did you put together 2 like 27-year-olds with a guy who's never in-game led before? Now that I look, if the idea was not to win this, or the idea wasn't that they were looking to win this major, there's quite a short time window for this team to actually be good. Like when we talk about Mouse, where they finished top 8, it's like that's encouraging because this team has time on their side. Fnatic don't have time on their side. Their team is not young. Like Nikodos is relatively young. Mezzy's like, he's not a child. He's not like 19. This team has a relatively short window where it can actually compete, and I don't know. It's a strange team because if it wasn't built to win immediately, it's almost not worth the effort. Like what? When are we planning to win then? In a year? Like in 6 months? Like even if you're good in 6 months, I think the lifespan of this team is relatively short. And I think, yes, it's encouraging that Fnatic did pretty well here, but you're nowhere near as excited for this team as you are for Mouse, because this team was built with the short term in mind. Mouse maybe ahead of schedule. Fnatic are probably behind schedule in a sense by design, which, look, man, it's their choice. I'm sure they have plans. I'm sure they'll guffaw at this and think, Roy's going to be good until he's 35, so it's fine. And Crims is never going to lose his touch. Maybe that's true. But I think there's quite a limited time window for this team to actually be good.
I think you're probably right on limited time. I just don't think that the time window has realistically started. I think it starts once we hit the next major season in January. I think it's probably not the major we just had is the time window. I think it's the next one. Right. Yeah. This core started in June, but like didn't actually start in June because they were still rocking with Heat for a little while there. August is like the beginning of this, and their tournaments between like September, October didn't actually really exist that much. We had 1 or 2, a couple across the place, right? And RMRs. So I give a little bit of hesitancy on saying that this was the window. But I definitely I think you're right on this team is built to, like, Mezzy's 24, which isn't that old in esport years, but like he's older than Elige.
Yeah, he's not a child
Like,
either.
think about that. He's older than Elige, and Elige has been
Yeah.
around for 7 trillion years.
But what I will say as well is the way Fnatic play
By the way, that's a
is.
lie. Elige is 25. I got my numbers wrong.
I did think he was probably older than that. But the problem is the way Fnatic play is very predicated on their mechanics. Like, they're not a structured team. The reason they were never going to be outsiders is because outsiders are so disciplined. Fnatic's T sides are just not at all structured. Like, they will get eight T rounds by just fighting you, and then next game they'll get like 1 T round. Is because the same thing they just did just doesn't work against like teams who are as good as them and more structured. Like, they were never going to be outsiders. Like, it was probably the comfiest outsiders will ever feel in a quarterfinal. It was just such a stylistic mismatch. Fnatic can only beat teams who are worse than them with this style, as far as
Yeah.
I'm concerned. And like, maybe Mezzi's going to turn into just this like Giga Chad Glaive-esque regen, like maybe, but that might take 6 months. You know, Roy might not be as good then. Crims might have fallen off. Like, their mechanics might not be there then. Like, it's it's obviously easier to say with hindsight, but it does look odd pairing a new in-game leader with 2 older players who are probably not going to be at their peak for too much longer. Crims
Yeah.
arguably has already passed his peak.
Yeah. I think you're probably right there, but on one hand, it seems to be working to some degree. Just definitely not as much as I don't think anyone was expecting.
Yeah, I mean, they placed better than expected, but I think that was as much due to underperformance from big teams as it was their own overperformance. To say that they don't look like a team capable of beating genuinely good teams. Although I did kind of think the same might be true of outsiders, so they just didn't play any.
Yeah, I want to skip over outsiders, because we'll talk about them at the end. Obviously, major winners. Let's talk about Spirit, a team that you are obviously high on, a fan of, etc. Insert the
Yep.
chopper thumbs up meme here. Uh, this team looked all over the place.
Yeah. With everything we said about Mouse is pretty similar to Spirit, right? Like, they really do have time on their side. Like, even on Mouse, you've got Dexter, who's like, I think he's 28, 29. Like,
He's 28, I believe.
yeah, he's been around for. Chopper's like 3 years younger than him. Like, in 3 years' time, these players will be quite possibly at the peak of their powers. Like, Wonderful will be 20, Patsy will be like 22, Siren will be in his like early 20s. Like, they've finished top 8 at back-to-back majors now.
Yeah.
Even though they're not in like the Lerva Green, whatever. I mean, they're that's a whole other can of worms. We'll save for when we can actually spend like an hour to talk on this. But look, yeah, they might not have won. They lost to Heroic, which yeah, it happens. Heroic are a very good team. They put up a pretty decent fight as well. They'll be annoyed that they didn't go to semi-finals and onwards because, again, much like Cloud9, they might not get another better chance to win a major.
Yeah,
But I didn't think they did particularly well in Antwerp, and they just smashed teams. Like,
I truly think that this team will have more time to win a major.
they've got more time, but are they going to get a better chance than having to beat Heroic, Furia outsiders?
They may not have a better chance, right? With the same way Cloud9 did. Again, this major was super open, but I think that separately than Cloud9's very set in their roster. The roster's been the same for 2 years, right? There is a ceiling to this roster to a degree. And we haven't seen a huge amount of this new Spirit roster yet, so we're a little all over the place on that to a degree. Right? There's an unknown ceiling on this Spirit roster. Now we may be at the ceiling, right? It may be that everything's downhill from here, but we don't know what it is. The Cloud9 roster is a lot more tested than this one, So it leads me to believe that their skill level is what it is.
What's encouraging for Spirit is that Wonderful actually looked like the player they thought they were signing. He was a bit cold for the first few months he came in, and I was a bit worried about him. But he had some really good maps, really impactful maps. Maybe not the same superstar carry that Dexter was,
Yeah.
but Spirit made it very
Not many
clear that's not what they wanted.
not many people are going to be.
No, but also Spirit basically said like playing around Dexter is really difficult, and we're happy to have somebody who's a bit more like malleable. They didn't use the word malleable because that's a very difficult word to translate, I imagine. But yeah, as I say, like Spirit, you're encouraged because they are so young, and they've done well at back-to-back majors. Now this is twice now they've lost their best player and not got any worse. Arguably even better when they lost Mia, they got better. When they lost Dexter, you can argue, it's pretty similar level. Like,
I was to say, at least it's a sideways move at the least.
yeah, they lost Dexter and went sideways. That's really impressive.
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't know who even gets the credit, because it's obviously easy to point at Chopper and go like this guy's clearly on something, but I think you have to give some credit to Halley as well, because Chopper wasn't an in-game leader on Vega Squadron. He became an in-game leader on Spirit. Maybe he's just really naturally gifted at it, but I think that you're probably looking at a situation where Halley has really helped, and that's probably why. Oh, having said that, in Antwerp they didn't even have Halley, and they still made semi-finals. This team is just like, they're just magic. They're just like, they just always find themselves in the top 8. They're like
They're the bad news. No, they're the bad news Eagles of the champion stage.
Yeah, sure.
They are the same as bad news Eagles is to play-in stages, as Spirit is to playoffs.
It's like there's teams in the Champions League who just used to always be in the top 16, and they would never win, and they'd usually lose at the round of 16 or like a maximum quarterfinal. Like Benfica were one of them, like Olympique Lyon were one of them. They would just always just make it that far, and then they were capped. But you had to give them credit. Like, they were clearly really good because they just kept making top 16. And that's what Spirit are doing. Like, and it does feel like in a year or two, like maybe it all clicks and they do become top 3 team in the world. Like that's the thing with when you look at Cloud9, Mouse, and Spirit, you can see in a year or two maybe they get better. Like maybe Patsy finds some consistency with his like incredibly explosive. Like maybe Siren like turns those like great moments he has into a consistent play style where he's getting like 1.2 ratings consistently instead of like having great moments in 1.06 games. Like that you can sort of see that progression. Even if you think it's a little far-fetched, you can see how it could happen. Whereas with Fnatic, I don't see how they improve and how they ever break into the top 8. Obviously, they finished top 8, but like, you still wouldn't call them one of. Yeah, you still wouldn't call them one of the best 8 teams in the world. But like,
yeah, no, I don't think anyone would. I think people still put FaZe and Liquid up there, even after the showing at the major. All right, let's move on to the nemesis of Liquid, historically heroic. They made the major finals.
Yep.
Which I don't think many people expected from heroic at this event. I think
not until you saw the bracket.
Yeah, not until you saw the bracket. But again, I think any team with this bracket could have made the finals, especially after Furia beat Na'Vi. After Furia beat Na'Vi, it was really anyone's game. And they capitalized.
Heroic don't lose to underdogs. I told you a year ago. They don't lose to underdogs.
Other than outsiders.
I don't think outsiders were ever.
I don't think outsiders fits on the chart of over and underdogs.
No,
I think they're their own chart.
They live outside the Overton window.
Yeah.
No, Heroic are just so reliable. Like it's it's strange to see a team who are so aggressive be so reliable because their playstyle is so unique and it's so interesting to watch. They just constantly take space. Like you don't get a spare like 30 seconds against heroic. You just they're always pushing something. They're always like seeing how much space they can get, seeing how far they can go on a flank, seeing how much you're willing to relinquish control. And I think against teams who aren't necessarily as good, they will just strangle them. But the problem is, you don't beat outsiders at that game. That's like
Yeah.
you beat outsiders by just being the better team. There's really no, you don't outplay or you know, you can maybe anti-strat them on something like holding your utility for as long as possible, so you have a Molotov in those last 15 seconds of the round. Like, but you don't. You can't take map control off outsiders for free, like you can off Furia. Like Furia will relinquish control because they're being aggressive on the other side of the map. Outsiders are never being aggressive; they're always waiting for you to take control, which made it very difficult for heroic. But against other teams, like especially ones who they can overpower firepower-wise, they're really oppressive.
Mhm.
Like it's very difficult if you're not better than Stoud, if you're not better than Shush, if you're not better than Tessa, and they just decide they're going to take this control off you, uh, like they're just going to. They're going to outmuscle you. They're going to strangle you. You're going to run out of space. You're going to have to run into a stack with 20 seconds left on the clock. But again, like Outsider's style is so disciplined, and it's you can't be aggressive against Outsiders. They're like a They're like a stall. You ever play Pokemon with the idea of a stall team where it's just 6 defensive Pokemon and eventually you just bleed out and it takes like 150 turns? That's how outsiders play. And
I play Bruiser in TFT. I understand this. It's just build
yeah,
up as
sure.
much health and armor and MR as possible and just survive.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like you can't just full Zerg rush them. You just have to be so patient. And Heroic don't do patient. Fnatic don't do patient. Mouse don't really either.
Yeah. I don't have much to say about heroic because I feel it really was bracket, and I hate to say that because them up against Spirit is just a good matchup for them, right? Them up against Fury obviously was a battle of the arena, right? There were
That
so
was a
many
fun
Brazilian
one.
fans. That was a banger game to watch, but like I could have told you that heroic was the better team there, right? They
Yeah,
didn't lose to the
they
underdog.
smacked him on Nuke. Like they
Yeah.
annihilated him on Nuke. They won every clutch. They won. They just strangled him on the T side. Like there was no like Furia were never even in that game. It was like 8-2 before Furia woke up. Game over.
Yeah,
Like
like
as soon as as soon as they won map 2 after that massive momentum swing, you kind of just felt Furia
yeah,
were in trouble here.
yeah, it was just kind of done at that point. And then the grand final itself was just brutal.
It was a non-event, but
Yeah.
I think people are going to sleep on this win from outsiders because of the sort of storyline of all the good teams capitulate. But Mouse beat Cloud9 quite handily, and they destroyed Mouse. Like
Mhm.
Heroic beat Furia. Furia looked really good. I mean, Furia beat Na'Vi in a very similar like beating Furia in front of that crowd was not easy. Outsiders demolished them. Like Outsiders
It,
just dicked everyone. Like I think people are going to like forget almost like or not realize how much better than everyone else they played they were. Like
yeah, I mean
obviously
it was
they won the event, but they were just so much better than Heroic, so much better than Matic. Wasn't
it
even
was
close in
two
any of them.
in the playoffs. There were 3-2-0s. It was heroic over Spirit, and then 2 of the 3 games from outsiders including the grand finals, right?
Yeah.
It was a brutally clear that Outsiders was just a better team than Heroic in the finals.
Yeah, they were like, people are going to point to the bracket, the seeding, whatever. Outsiders were the best team at the event, and it's not even close. Like, you say all you like, people want to say, like, oh, FaZe were, FaZe underperformed. FaZe got reamed by Team Vitality. FaZe lost to Bad News Eagles in the best of three. Like, you can say what you want about their history, about the players, about how good they've been. There was nothing to suggest FaZe were any good at this event. There's nothing to suggest Na'Vi would have beaten Outsiders at this event. There's nothing to suggest Team Liquid would have beaten Outsiders. There's certainly nothing to suggest Vitality would have got near Outsiders. Outsiders were comfortably the best team at the event, and people will just put it like, oh, yeah, it was bad seeding, dodgy bracket, whatever. They were the best team at the event by some distance.
I'm actually, I guess we'll talk about Outsiders for a minute. I guess we are. I think it's a huge thing for James to win a major. Because I feel like he's always played second fiddle in CIS. Yeah. He's always been the second team behind Cloud9, behind Na'Vi, behind everyone, right? However, this team has like existed previously. In the VP, in Avant-Garde, when James was just starting up in the major and made the major final against Astralis, right? Like, James always played second fiddle, and this was the event that, not specifically just James, because Flit had one of the greatest of Flit had an insane event.
Yeah, Flit, Fame, and James, I think, were three of the top 5 rated players at the event.
Yeah. I mean, Flit had an insane event, and I don't want to take away from Flit's event, but we spent an entire 20 minutes in our post in our post play-in episode, right? You and I, actually, maybe it was the pre-major episode. This is the pre-major episode that we talked about yelling at people to stop being opping IGLs. And we said, okay, Fallen did this, and that was great. And Cadian's doing it, and I guess it kind of works, but doesn't really work, right?
And we didn't mention more in Brazil. I meant it more in Brazil, because James was clearly good at it.
We were definitely talking about Brazil, because it seems like every IGL is also not a player. But it seems that we've forgotten, at this point, Fallen changed how the game was played, but James may be one of the most consistent op IGLs ever. He may be the most consistent op IGLer.
But the fact that these players, James and Fallen's one of the greatest players to ever play. Even if you don't think he's one of the greatest players ever to play the game, he's one of the greatest people in camp. He built a scene on his back. He in-game led and AWP'd. He did everything for that team. James has been to 2 major finals as an AWPer. He's a major MVP as an AWPer and an IGL. These 2 players stand out because they're the only ones who can do it. It's when I have to watch people like Woody doing it, it frustrates me. I mean, I wrote an article. I don't think it exists anymore because it was on Rush B Media. RIP, much like my own Twitter account. About why in-game leaders should AWP. And my rationale was that if you're an in-game leader who doesn't frag, is it better to have an 8-kill rifler and a 28-kill AWPer, or a 17-kill rifler and a 17-kill AWPer, and just have your in-game leader just have the crutch, have the gun that can get some easy frags, so you have 5 players who are fragging. And not only that, you compress the roles a little bit. I tried to introduce the term role compression, which is a term I stole from Pokemon. Again, where if you have somebody who in-game leads and AWPs, you can be a bit more flexible with your other players, because you don't need to fill in. That's 1 role out of 5 taken, and you filled up 2 of the important parts. Whereas if you need an AWPer and you need an in-game leader, and then say you're somebody like Alexi B who always has a support player as well, you're left with 2 riflers. Whereas, if you can, this Outsiders team has 4 great rifles. Okay, Kika, I don't think he had more than 16 kills and more. I think he's in one map, and that was it. But back in the day, he was a star rifler. Like when Avangard made the major final, he was a star as well. They had Flip, Fame, and then who's the 5th on
Norbert.
Outsiders? Norbert. Like you watch Norbert play, like his mechanics are amazing. Like they have so much like rifle depth because they're allowed to have rifle depth because they have somebody who fills in 2 roles at the same time, which most teams don't have.
Yeah, I want to make one more note about James. Fallen changed how ops played. He really introduced. He took the same roughly the same style that Kenny S had with the combat opping to a different level.
Yeah, because
And
he pulled around it.
He changed how oppers op. James changed how IGLs call.
I think he's changed how AWPers op as well. I think I guess you could probably attribute it to device as well. But the way people just save all the time now because they've realized the AWP is so overpowered. James, I mean, it's named after James. It's called James time. Like,
yeah,
and now he's been validated on that. Like, I think it's only going to make the situation like more people are just going to save all the time.
Yeah, but I think in general, right, the way that we talked about how Outsiders is never considered an underdog or an overdog; they're just outsiders. I think that's a huge part in the matter because of the way James calls, because it's so different than everyone else.
Yep.
It's the only team that calls like that. They are weird as fuck, and I mean that in like the nicest way possible because they've said
perverted is what they are.
They've said every bit of meta calling, meta play, meta gun. Who cares? We're doing the things we want to do, and they won a major doing it.
Yeah,
so
you can't say fairer than that. Like, James has been proven. Has proven that his style of play is, if not superior, a very strong way to play the game, and I think that's what he probably set out to do. And you can't do more than win a major.
Yeah. All right, I want to skip past Furio for a second. I want to talk about Na'Vi. Na'Vi had a very adequate showing at this major, and to Na'Vi standards, it was very poor.
Yeah, I mean they haven't looked the same. I think Simple's not in God mode, and there's like understandable reasons for that. Some Young was brought in to just be a warm body on the basis that you didn't need him to do more than that. But Bit's been a bit more inconsistent this year. He actually looked pretty decent against Furia. But Simple's not in God tier mode. Electronics not in amazing form. I mean, he's always been somebody who's like a big game player, right? But he wasn't necessarily at this event. I think there'll be a point next year where Na'Vi will click again and they'll be the best team in the world for a few months. But
I think they need
unfortunately, the war in Ukraine has just completely killed their momentum, and obviously the Boomit situation as well. Like, they were on track to be arguably the best team of all time, and like things outside the server just stopped that.
I think that this team realistically needs to just go away until the next major. Just don't play a tournament. Just like literally,
but they're not going to do
that. They won't do it, but just they need to disappear and just not play Counter-Strike. Deal with the stuff in their own lives. Like, I think that
but it's just not that simple, is it? Unfortunately,
it's definitely not that simple. But I think
I
that
imagine for a lot of them, Counter-Strike is an escape from that.
Yeah, it's such a rough situation to be in, and I hate that I feel like this is month 10 or something of us using this as an excuse.
Yeah, but
And at one point it needs to stop, but the question is does it really?
it's
And
really hard when you've watched Simple for 4 years and then you go like you see him and he's still good, but you know there's another gear in there, and it's really hard to not make an excuse for him. It's Simple, and you know
yeah.
that he's the best player of all time. You know he's got it in him still. It's just like, unfortunately, it's completely. I think it's derailed his career. I hope he can get back to just god tier form.
Yeah, I will say bright spot for Simple, or I don't even know if it's a bright spot for Simple, but he was named the Counter-Strike Player of the Decade.
Yeah, I don't think he'll give a shit about that. To be
I don't think he'll give a shit, but it's still it's one of those things that like you got to think about for a second, because it's like holy shit, they're putting him over like OG Get Right and OG Forest and
oh yeah, I
like
mean,
all
obviously.
of it, but it's a thinking about thing. All right,
But
let's
it
talk.
was actually voted for by the players, wasn't it? But
Yeah, it was put on by the players. Let's talk about Furia. Last team to talk about. I want to start with this with K Serato had an event.
yeah, he's been doing this for a little while now. This was his form coming into the event, and I kind of thought it was a blip, but maybe he is just the best player in the world at the moment.
K Serato and Yuri. We cannot discount Yuri because Yuri was also
Yeah,
absolutely
dude,
lights
Yuri,
out.
Yuri was good, but let's not like
Yuri wasn't good
let's
in
let's not pretend,
playoffs. No,
let's not
no.
pretend he was anywhere near as good as Keza. Keza was the best player at the event.
Yeah,
Like, no ifs, no buts. Keza might be the best player in the world at this moment in time. Like
yeah,
he's just like he's dropping like 1.4 average over the last like 2 months, I think.
yeah.
He's in god mode.
He put up 1.4 against Navi, and then in a loss to Heroic, in the 2-1 loss to Heroic, 1.36. Like the
Yeah.
guy is he whatever gear Simple has lost, he has
Yeah.
found it.
And he's doing it with a rifle as well. Like I know it's kind of like overblown to talk about AWP versus rifle, blah, 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 but there are very few players who consistently put up these ratings with rifles. And I know Fury are a weird case where they are very different in the way they approach the game. But KS Serato is in god mode. He is ridiculous at the moment. The fact that Furia don't win the event with KS Serato performing like this probably means there's some like I I don't know how Furia can ever win an event if they can't win it when KS Serato is playing like this. How do they ever win an event? Like what? How much?
I don't know what
How
to tell
much
you, man.
better can KS Serato play? How much more can you expect from Drop? How much more can you expect from Yuri and Save? Like there is an issue here, and I love art, but
But
if you can't win with KS Serato playing like this, something has to change. I don't know what it is, but
it's
it,
gotta be something.
it does kind of point to art, but then I don't know who you get who's better than him.
That's its own bag of worms. I want to do a debrief of the Rio Major. I think next week we're getting into a weird bit of the season where we've got fall final premiere blast premiere fall final starting next week. So obviously next week we'll talk about our preview for that, but that won't take an entire episode. I want to do a debrief of the Rio Major from viewing perspective. Because I think that this major was unlike anything else we had ever seen. From viewers, from all the reports that we have had from people that were there in Rio at the time. I want to do a little debrief on that. So I think the Brazil talk with Art and that kind of stuff, we'll get to that at that point. I want to get into one more topic before we end for today, because we are already at 50 minutes. Eliza Masters Esports Espo something is going on. It's a tier 2 event that has a couple of tier 1 teams in it, so I figured we'd talk about it for half a second. Unfortunately though, like here's the thing, half these teams are rocking with subs, right? Big is still rocking with Keto. or Sin, or I don't know at this point.
I think Favin's playing for Searson.
Yeah, Favin's playing for Searson, but not. I don't know. Searson's got COVID, so Favin's playing for whatever. But there's a bunch of teams here. Events going well-ish, I guess, and I think that the biggest headline from this that I want to point out tonight, right now, is that Astralis is here, but Device is not.
Yeah, I think we covered this last week, but we don't understand why. Like, just surely this is the event you want to play to get him some confidence that he can play against these teams again. If he's not ready to play here, why would you then throw him in at the next big event you're at instead? It just doesn't make sense. Like, we can't make heads nor tails of it.
I got nothing. I have no clue why. He has officially played. He's officially played 1 year without an official match. Not being fielded in this tournament.
Yep, it's
absolutely insane. Did you folks talk about the quick G2 rumors that we had last week or earlier this week?
The G2 rumor.
Kassad coming to G2 as the coach.
Oh no, I don't like.
Okay, well that's a rumor. That's all I have on it.
We can talk about like Kenny S is back. He's on Falcons.
Yeah, they won their first match today.
Yeah,
apparently he was good.
Interesting. Yeah, he should be good at that level. I mean, he should. Like, you know,
no disagreement, man. It's not like he's completely washed. He's just semi-washed. All right. All right, we're going to be done for it this week. Next week will be our post-mortem on the Rio Major, and we'll talk about the Blast Premier Fall Finals. You can find us on Twitter at ReadTLDR, at Logan Ramhap, and at ElliotBCFC. That's Elliot spelled with 2 L's and 2 T's. Because I've definitely fucked up before. We will be back again next week.